Welcome to the Nonprofit Report, your update on nonprofit organizations, issues, and leaders. I'm your host, Mark Oppenheimer. Today, we're talking about youth services in the San Francisco Bay Area with two fabulous leaders, Doug Stiles, Executive Director of Adolescent Counseling Services, and Sherilyn Adams, CEO of Larkin Street Youth Services. We have had long relationships with your organizations. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. It's great to have you both on.
It's great to be here.
So we're going to start with you, Doug, but Sherilyn, then I'd love you to jump in because we're going to talk about the state of youth services and in particular, the two organizations, Adolescent Counseling Services and Larkin Street Youth, occupy different and very distinctive places in the continuum of services to young people, very representative of large urban areas across the country. So Doug, let's start off by just talking about the state of youth and the kinds of services that you provide. And then Sherilyn, if you could do the same so that we're oriented. Doug?
Sure. I will give you a quick overview of Adolescent Counseling Services. The agency has been around over 50 years, just celebrated our 50th anniversary last year, and primarily providing mental health support to San Mateo and Santa Clara County adolescents. And also we provide support and education and counseling services to LGBTQ plus community. What we've been seeing recently is unique, I think, in the history of the organization. Coming out of the pandemic, we see a lot more people experiencing loneliness and isolation and depression and anxiety at levels we have not seen in a long time. For example, Palo Alto had another cluster of suicides this last year, which seems to happen every 10 years. They go through another cycle of several people committing suicide, several young people committing suicide. And what we try to do is get into schools. We have several school-based programs. We have an outpatient clinic with a sliding scale for people to come and receive counseling there. And we're out in the community doing presentations and education to try to change the trajectory of what's been happening with adolescents.
And Sherilyn, give us an orientation of Larkin Street.
Sure, thanks. So Larkin Street Youth Services has also been around for a long time. So we're about 43 years old. And we work primarily in San Francisco, but also now in Alameda County and soon to be in San Mateo County. And we provide a continuum of services to help young people who are at risk for or experiencing homelessness. That includes housing, education, employment, engagement services, outreach, mental health and behavioral health supports to young people. And I would say the things that we've seen change over the past year or two in particular are a significant increase in need. So we housed almost 700 young people last year between San Francisco and Alameda County, with the bulk being in San Francisco. We've seen an increase in the number of young people coming into our engagement and outreach programming and a number of new young people. So while overall in San Francisco and in other communities, we're seeing a slight decline in the number of young people experiencing homelessness, we are seeing that more and more of those young people are coming into services. We've been able to house more because especially in San Francisco, we created a lot of housing for young people in the past couple of years, which has been fantastic. But the need is still there, and I'm not sure that we're on the same trajectory in the Bay Area to increase housing opportunities and employment and education opportunities for young people.
The thing that really strikes me is the scale of the need. ACS served 26,000 individuals last year, if I have that right, Doug, and Larkin served 38,000 meals served at the drop-in center. I mean, it's just huge. When we're talking about youth, right, it's that sensitive time between being a child and being an adult. Talk a little bit about why you think young people who are transitioning from the childhood years into adult years might be feeling, Doug, like they are less supported, and why they might be more rejected to get to the point of actually self-harm or taking their lives. Why is that happening right now?
Well, I could give you a long answer, but I'm going to give you the short answer about the multiple things that are happening to young people nowadays. So as you were saying, adolescence is that critical period of social emotional development, of engaging with their peers, so they learn how to talk through conflicts, to learn who they want to become as an adult. Their identity component is critical to that. And we're at a time where there's hyper media influence of young people with social media, with being able to stream whenever you want to. And so trying to figure out who you are in this world today is much more difficult than it has been in the past.
And what we see is so idealized, right? I mean, none of us can really live up to it, but you're basically bombarded as you're trying to shape your identity with your failures, your deficiencies, the things that you're not, right? The money that you don't have, the access you don't have, the acceptance that you don't have. And instead of actually having that help you just, every time you pick up one of these things, you see what you can't buy, you can't have, you can't be, you're not pretty enough, you're not tall enough, you're not smart enough, whatever. It just seems like it's really tough, Sherilyn. Are you finding that? Do you agree with Doug that this sort of being bombarded constantly with these messages is really part of the issue?
For sure. I mean, I think Doug's one of the smartest clinicians I know, so I would agree with almost anything Doug would say when it comes to adolescents and young adults and leaders. I think it is compounded for young people experiencing homelessness or at risk for homelessness. So I think a lot about the long tail of COVID. So you take all the things that Doug talked about, and then you add that young people who were middle schoolers or early high schoolers in COVID or towards, during the mid-times of COVID, might not have stayed in school, might have lost parents to COVID, might have had significant disruptions in education or life, housing, other things, right? And so we already knew that if you didn't have a high school diploma or GED, you're exponentially more at risk for homelessness than your housed peers. And then if you are a person of color, if you're a young person of color, if you are LGBTQ, right, that just adds to your risk factors. And we've seen now this like social media pressure, the pressures of exactly what you said, Mark, right? Like every time we look at something, we're like, oh, I'm not that, right? Or I can't achieve that, right? And so I think that's really compounded for young people who are already just really dealing with their like basic needs, like how to get food or how to find a stable housing environment. And then our current sort of world around us is, somewhat attacking for folks that identify as LGBT or folks who are, really struggling. May feel a little bit more like they're not being seen as needing help, but being seen as the problem.
Well, and different types of different attributes, neurodivergent attributes. If you're blind or visually impaired, if you have a hearing impediment, if you have a speech impediment, if you're heavy or ultra thin, it ends up compounding. So how do we heal that process so that every young person, it just strikes me that if I look at across the people I know, the people who have good incomes and good jobs, their children have such a different life than the children of people, of adults who don't. That's not just. That's not right. That's systematically disadvantaging a whole class of children. How do we fix that? How do you fix that in your work? And how are you funded for that fix? And I know it's a never-ending struggle, so fix is kind of a stressed term. But if you can each weigh in, Sherilyn, why don't you go first? How do you actually adjust? You talked about housing first.
Yeah, I don't think it's housing only. I think it's a combination, right? For young people, as you said, and as Doug said, this time in life, this adolescence to young adulthood is critical. And so for sure, folks need safe housing. They need to be, we have a shelter for minors. If folks need immediate access to safety and shelter, they need that. And then they need longer term housing, probably not forever for most young adults, right? Because we want to pair that with education and employment and behavioral health and wellness services. So what I think is absolutely critical right now is a much deeper investment in education, employment. And I don't mean just your traditional pathways into college or to a four-year institution, right? And we really need to understand that how rapidly the world is changing and how much we need to provide a different level of support around access to employment and workforce development and pathways into college or technical training, paired with the sort of increased behavioral health supports that make sense to adolescents and young adults, so that they can develop that inner sense of like ability, hope, the possibilities of the future, which I think is what drives us as humans then to march forward.
And resilience, right? You're talking about not creating codependency, right? When you provide housing, you're not creating housing forever. You're creating housing as a bridge. Doug, how do you see it? This whole idea of providing services that are not codependent services, but are empowering services, teaching someone to fish rather than giving them a fish. How do you see it?
Well, I think there's two key things, especially when we're talking about mental health and LGBTQ young people. One is belonging, and the other is being seen. I think that it's critical that people feel like they belong to the community that they're in. And as Sherilyn was saying, people are being attacked, people are being separated. There's a lot of divisiveness happening currently in our communities. And so giving people an opportunity to be themselves in a group of other people who are similar to them is critical, so that they feel like they belong to the society around them, and so that they feel like they're being seen. One of the challenges in adolescence is we often feel like we're an outsider looking into the world, and nobody knows who we are. Nobody understands us. Nobody understands what we're going through. When the reality is, everybody's been an adolescent. Every adult has been an adolescent. It's been its different trajectory, but we've all been there with those emotional struggles, with those relationship struggles, with academic struggles that have happened. And those people that are wealthy, as you were saying, they can seek support and they can have the resources to make that happen. What we do, and definitely what Larkin does, is we reach out to those people that may not have those resources, may not know where they are, and connecting them to adults who can work with them through whatever the struggle is that they're in.
There's something that's happening in the culture where empathy is becoming something that is to be dismissed, right? Where this idea of identifying with somebody who is completely different than me or has a completely different lifestyle or value system, that's all dismissed, yep. Right? Because there's a right and a wrong for everything. And if you, to the extent that you deviate from me, Doug, you're wrong, right? How do we deal with that aspect of it? Because that's not something that, you can serve a young person, but really the cause of the issue seems to be our own lack of empathy and our own inability to get over ourselves and just see a young person who needs help and might be on a track to self-harm. How do you deal with that?
Well, we've stopped being able to disagree with each other and get along. And I think that this is critical for adolescents when they look around and they look at the discourse that's happening in the media. We don't have experiences where, I'm different than you and that's okay. We can have different opinions and that's okay, and we can hang out. One of the things that I try to impart to our trainees and to our therapists as they're working with us is that every encounter with a person is an opportunity to go closer to humanity and to build relationships with people. And that's not easy to do in the modern world because of exactly what you're pointing out. People feel like, well, if I disagree, then I'm not like them. I can't hang out with those people. And we need to find those opportunities and work in a space where it's safe enough to disagree and to, be in relationship with somebody.
Right. When you go from seeing differences being interesting to differences being a threat, I mean, that's what Doug is talking about, right? Right, Sherilyn?
Yeah, I think, yes, I agree 100%. I would say we don't disagree well with each other. we compare our insides with others' outsides, and we.
That is fabulous. Could you repeat that?
I take no credit, comes from the recovery community, but it is really about when we compare ourselves, our insides to somebody else's outsides. And I think it's exacerbated when somebody's outside is their Instagram post at the beach that makes it look like they're having a perfect life, if that might have only been the perfect moment in their year, right? But we do that. I also think it's about not being able to disagree, not celebrating difference as opposed to judging difference. And I think at the heart of that is most people feeling some level of, or a lot of people feeling some level of anxiety or not sure what the future is going to bring. And so we get protective and we go internal, and then we're in our fight or flight response. And to your point, we have lost some of our humanity and our social contract with each other, that like first we help, or first we assume good intention, or we see that person, that young person who is struggling, as not somebody who has failed or is bad, but instead somebody who's struggling and needs empathy and support and understanding and opportunity.
I can't tell you how often I talk with people, young people, older people who are struggling, and they are so relieved when I say I share those struggles. Right? Members of my family share those struggles. We've gone through this. When you talk with people who are at the cusp where they're not seeking support, but they obviously need it, how do you make it real that it's okay and to go to family, friends, people like yourselves, others in the community? How do you convey an awareness of need, of their own need, and also a route to get that need addressed? Doug, could you take a cut, and then Sherilyn, could you jump in?
Yeah, I would say that's the challenge, and that's the challenge of the moment in a way, because we've been doing a really good job at decreasing stigmatization around mental health issues. Young people talk about their anxiety, their bipolar, their whatever is going on, they can talk about it. But seeking treatment is something that we haven't been able to help with.
Or even talking about it with somebody, maybe it's somebody you know, or maybe it's a stranger, right? Treatment is about talking to a stranger, but you could talk with somebody you know, and that's a form of treatment too, right?
Yeah. And I would add to that, Larry, going back to social media, or at least the ease of the digital marketplace, we now have a bunch of mental health professional organizations that are seeking out clients. And we go back to adolescence, where the key to adolescence is social connection. A digital connection's not the same as in person. And so there's lots of opportunities to watch videos about somebody with their mental health struggles and feel like you're getting something out of it. But it does not replace the person-to-person or people sitting in a group and talking through the struggles that they're having to get to the other side.
Okay, I'm going to challenge you there. You're just trying to advance adolescent counseling services, because adolescent counseling services uses people. And my organization is using a machine, and they sound like a person. Why is my organization that is using a machine that sounds like a person not as good as a person?
I will tell you from my personal experience, an example that will point to why it's so critical that there's a three-dimensional person who's in front of you. I had a medical procedure years ago, extremely painful, and the nurse came in and put their hand on me and said, "It's okay, just breathe." And my whole body relaxed. AI can't do that for you. A digital therapist can't do that for you. And a digital therapist isn't reading the nuances of interaction that are happening in the moment, which is critical to social development. I think that online therapy is great for adults. There's easy access, which makes a lot of people engage in treatment that they may not otherwise. But eventually you got to get to people, because that's the core of what we do. That's what we're talking about is missing, is this connection with humans. And you need to bring that into the treatment room.
Sherilyn, what do you think? Can Doug be replaced by a robot?
No, he cannot. Look, we're human, right? And humans need humans. And so I think there's roles for the ways that AI can help with things. I think there's, online therapy that can be helpful if you're stabilizing, or if you're already stable and you're like working through something that's just tricky in the moment, but you have some skills. But adolescence, young adulthood is kind of a different stage of life. I think a lot about it as a couple of things. One, and Doug sort of said this earlier, but we need to be, like, human beings ultimately need to be seen, heard, and believed, right? And to be seen, heard, and believed, you have to feel seen for who you are in that moment by the person that you're interacting with. And that is harder to happen in an online setting. It's harder to happen when you can't see all the nuances Doug referred to. If you're also wanting to feel like you've been believed and understood and really heard, right? That takes a lot of like things that happen in an interaction with another human being. We think about it a lot at Larkin Street as like meeting folks where they're at, right? I'm sure as Doug does at Adolescent Counseling Services, right? Like, we need to meet people where they are. We need to like be able to hand them food, right? Because change happens at the speed of trust, right? So if I'm hungry and you notice I'm hungry and you give me a sandwich, I feel like you're seeing what's happening for me. So we first have to meet people where they are, and then we can help them on their journey or through their challenges. And that at this stage needs to be human to human most of the time.
Yeah, I think that the part of it for me is about caring and self-identification, right? Caring is not an absolute. I can't take over your life and care so much that I want to live it and be prescriptive and so on. But I can self-identify. You both and I have, because we are human beings and because we've gone through certain things and our family members have gone through certain things, when we say that we can identify, it comes from an authentic place. It's truth, right? Doesn't mean that it's absolute, doesn't mean that it's always going to be applicable. But you can't get that from a robot and a large language model that is systematically, basically figuring out ways to convince you of something that is fundamentally not true, right? Your machine therapist has never lived through what they're talking about. There's no way. And I think that's part of it, right? It's authenticity, isn't it, Doug?
Yeah, well, I would add that humans are imperfect, and case managers are imperfect, and therapists are imperfect.
It's a feature, isn't it? It's not a bug.
Exactly. It's critical that we are able to experience somebody else's imperfection and continue to move forward with them. Even somebody that we trust, that we're putting our life in their hands, that they're not going to get everything right, but they're going to acknowledge when something's not right and help move forward together. That is a critical learning for everybody.
So as you're looking at evolving your organizations and in this tech intensive, right? We're all using this. Look at what we're doing right now. We're all using our devices. And I'm sure your people are using these language models to shape text and questions and interactions and so on. Where do you see the proper balances being, Sherilyn, in terms of keeping the human piece, but also taking advantage of the advantages that some of these more modern technologies can provide?
Yeah, I think for the ways, I think it's about using AI smartly to enhance your effectiveness or efficiency. And that is not going to be in the direct provision of services. We are using AI to help do large analysts doing analytics, like looking at, I can't even say it, so obviously I'm not doing it, but look at how we can improve the effectiveness of our services by being informed by years of data, and that can give a case manager like a suggested intervention based on what the data is telling them, but that's still up to the case manager to decide if that's the right timing, right? So that's a tool for case managers or staff to be able to do their work, the minutia of their work better, help them with things. That's a great use of AI. We can free up time for folks to do the direct work. And then for us, it's also about preparing young people for the work world that will exist. So how are we exposing and sharing and training and educating young people about AI and the technologies available to them and the safe and smart use of them and the challenges and ethical considerations. And this is the world they will inherit and they are living in, and work opportunities will look different today, next year than they did today and beyond. So how are we helping to prepare young people to work in that world? I think those are the ways we're trying to think about it.
I'm also encouraging people to be more intentional about what they're using their technology for. Doug, how are you dealing with the balance between the human and the tech side?
We're having many conversations about this because, as Sherilyn said, this is the world we live in, and this is the world that young people are inheriting. So it would be nice to go on some island and unplug completely, but that's not reality. The reality is this is where we are. So we're having a lot of conversations, but those conversations are about when may tech be useful and when is it starting to be harmful, and finding out those areas. I know that some states are starting to pass laws where young people can only be online for a certain number of hours, or, I don't know how you regulate that, but starting to talk about limits, because the models for AI, for many of the social networks that people get on, those models are to keep you on as long as possible. They're not always about helping you and getting you the information. So teaching people to be observers of their behavior in those areas, and being able to switch off and engage with humans at times as well. We're talking a lot about tech and internet addiction and how does that impact people, and we're sharing that with young people so that they can be aware of the things that you don't notice that you're being influenced by as you move forward.
Look, it's sort of like the 70s and the drug culture, right? There were no laws and no illegal none of these drugs were illegal until people started to die from them, self-harm from them. And then eventually there was a network of laws. And then even more potent is that people came to know that if you took these substances, you were going to hurt yourself physically and psychologically, right? So part of this is just coming to grips with the fact that, maybe there's some regulation that's required, but it's also self-regulation, right, Doug?
Yeah. Well, and I think what you're talking about around addiction is a great example. There's some people that can use a substance and walk away from it. Right. There's many people who use a substance and then they become addicted. And then, there's a sequela that we don't like to see. And I would say the same with tech. There's some people that are, for whatever reason, able to walk away from it. But these models are built to get you hooked. Right. And many people, especially somebody who's struggling, especially somebody who's looking for companionship or belonging, especially somebody who may be anxious in social interaction, and here's a safer way to do it, maybe, they're the people that are going to be hurt the most. And they're the people that need to be taught how to step away from it. And
also those who are inventing these tech platforms, if you are studying up on addiction in order to create more engagement, maybe that's a clue that you've kind of lost your way as a professional and as a person that's trying to make the world a better place. Before we wrap up, I'd like to go through just some of the services that ACS provides and that Larkin Services provides, and just if you could each pick out one of the outstanding areas just to discuss. In terms of ACS, you have community counseling, off-campus counseling. You have a substance use disorder treatment program. You have an LGBTIA support group, and Larkin has the engagement center, housing, employment, education, wellness. Doug, pick out one thing that you're particularly proud of, and then Sherilyn, if you could also do the same. This is the thing that I'd like everybody to remember when they go away thinking about ACS and Larkin?
Yeah, what I would add to the list that you have there is something that holds us all together. It's kind of the glue, which is the Dr. Ray Training Institute for Psychotherapy. So we have a lot of trainees who are in their graduate program in counseling and social work who come in and learn how to work with adolescents, because there's not a lot of people out there who are specialized in working with this population. And so we feel like across all of those programs, we're training the next generations of clinicians who are also going to help having a huge impact on this population.
Talk about employment, talk about non-traditional routes to a career, really important. And basically you're helping people who are really knowledgeable to heal those who are coming next. That's just a fabulous program. Sherilyn, what are you particularly proud of at Larkin?
Hard to pick one. What I'm really focused on, we are focused on two things. One is prevention, so getting to young people, you're earlier in their experience of homelessness or before they experience homelessness, right? We're not trying to interrupt homelessness. We actually want to live in a world where no young person lives outside for even one night. So we're super excited about prevention work, getting to young people and high schools, getting to young people sooner. So that's a big part of our work, and working with some partners around that. And using data to help identify young people proactively who might be at risk for homelessness. So that's one area. And then we're super passionate right now. I've talked about it a lot. It's education and employment. Like, this is a critical time. This is a lost generation if we don't really work together to figure out how to make sure they have education and employment and the tools to be healthy and happy. And that's our collective missions, I think, between the two organizations, is to ensure young people safely and with optimism, hope, and capacity and tools are able to thrive in their adulthood.
There are lots of places to invest in improving our society, but I can safely say there's no better place to invest than young people and helping them get a good start in life, helping them deal with their future, their challenges, which we have all had. I'd like to thank you, Doug Stiles, Executive Director of Adolescent Counseling Services, Sherilyn Adams, CEO of Larkin Street Youth Services. And I'd like to also thank all of your staff, your board members. I'd like to thank the people that you serve who are also part of your communities and your funders. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. You've just done fabulous, fabulous work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. It's great to be here.